I am a mindset coach. I coach high performers into being able to really tap into their full potential by really understanding their thoughts and their feelings and their emotions and understanding what keeps getting in the way of them trying to achieve their goals and their dreams,
Okay,
right? So I stumbled upon your work when I was watching a show called Impact Theory.
cool. Okay.
And on this show, I mean, when I watched the show, I think I watched it like 2 or 3 times just because there was so much content that was just invaluable, right? So that's how I discovered you. So thank you so
Okay.
much for being with me here today. I know you're the founder and CEO of the DNA company, which is actually located in Toronto.
Yep.
Um, and I honestly, after watching the show on Impact Theory, I was completely sold on everything that you said. Like nothing ever made more sense than that show for me.
Wow.
So, like, and if you even had read the comments on YouTube, so many people were saying the same thing. Like, wow, this made so much sense. And that's why I really wanted to connect with you. So I personally did go to your website and download your DNA test. But what I would really love is if you could just share who you are and what you do in the space of biotech and who you can impact.
Cool. Yeah, sure. So in order to do what you're saying, we had to take a different route. So I personally needed my genetics reviewed because I was sick.
Mhm.
So I had multiple chronic conditions, which I don't have anymore. I resolved all of them. And it was through understanding my own genome that there were certain genes that were entirely missing. It's not even about what version or what variant. Like I was just not doing these jobs with my body, and
Mhm.
they had to do with key detoxification processes. And so our current reality of environmental toxins and food toxins, etc., was too much for me, which made me really sick. And so I walked away from what I was doing at the time, which was PR and marketing around startup companies that would help startups grow. And I said, I found what I got to work on. This is like my legacy now. I got to change the world. And so we
Yeah,
built the DNA company, and we built it on that thinking that this stuff needs to be a lot easier to use. There's so much valuable information in our genetics, which is not accessible or even understood, because it's all at this deep PhD level, right? And even the PhDs don't know what we know. It's not taught anywhere. We just made it practical. And so that's all it is. We're saying that when it comes to a chronic condition, aging, performance, any of that stuff, we understand how to personalize every decision somebody needs to make,
right.
and make it the best decision for them. And then all of a sudden you thrive.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's incredible. And, like when I went onto your website and I got your test kit, I did the test, I sent it back to your lab. When I got my results, like honestly, like my jaw dropped to the floor. I could not believe what I was reading. Like I was literally reading me. Like this is me. I'm at page after page. I'm like, this is insanity. I cannot believe that this test truly explains who I am or like who I think I am. Like
Yeah.
I'm a big proponent of like personality tests. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Myers-Briggs
Oh, for
personality
sure. Yeah.
test.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I truly believe in them because every person I ask to do them, and I do them as part of my coaching business, like I ask people, can you do the test? Just because I want to get some insights on who you are so that I understand your challenges and then put that in the lens of your personality. So just coach you better. And like for myself, like I am an INFJ. So this is like the one of the 16 personality types that's the rarest. It's less than 2% of the population actually ends up as an INFJ. And
Hmm.
when I took your report and I mirrored it with the INFJ personality type, it was so similar. I mean,
Hmm.
except that, the report that I received from your company, it's scientifically based, right? So
Right.
it was like, and the insights in terms of like, the fact that, I have like deep empathy, I'm intuitive, like the things that it was saying are undeniable,
Yeah.
undeniable, you
And
know?
we know more than what's in the reports. There's just certain things we're not allowed to say because direct to consumer, just regulations, FDA and Health Canada, etc.
Right.
But what we've done in the reports you received, is we've interpreted. It's not a gene report per se. It's not here's your DNA and it's more like here's a problem, anxiety. And
Yes.
here's how we can use your DNA to interpret how you manage anxiety. And by the way, anxiety isn't one thing. And
Right.
the other thing with mood and behavior, um, what we've learned from dealing with thousands and thousands of people is most chronic mood and behavior conditions don't need to happen.
Mm,
Anxiety, depression, addiction, procrastination, all these things that we constantly are burdened with aren't real. What they are is we are wired like yourself with some kind of superpower, this deep empathetic type behavior, right?
mhm.
And you are wired to be a certain person to cope with a certain environment, and you're in the wrong context, and
So
you're in the
wrong
wrong
environment.
yeah, and that wrong context, environment, input, people, all this stuff becomes a burden. So take me, for example. I have a very low expression of dopamine receptor, so it's very hard for me to experience pleasure and reward. I also have very fast neurochemical clearance, so it doesn't last very long. So I could potentially become depressed very easily because the world sucks, nothing feels good. Or I could find something that feels good and I can become addicted very easily, much more than the average person, because it's so hard to maintain the pleasure because it doesn't last long enough for me. The neurochemical clearance is really fast. Or I could go down the achievement route and seek reward because dopamine powers both pleasure and reward. And you only need one, you need satisfaction from either one. And if you look at me and the years I've been on this planet, I've experienced all three of those, right? And so I'm not any one of them. I'm not an addict, I'm not depressed, and I'm not an entrepreneur. Put me in the right context and you'll get a different outcome,
Right.
right?
So it's almost, yeah, it's almost as if like you've got these certain gifts, if given the right environment, can actually thrive and
Yeah.
create. Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
and we coach people through this all the time. We've had people that are literally suicidal that within days are thriving because they didn't understand what their young gentleman who, for example, the most recent example I can think of, who was working in engineering, and his brain just doesn't allow him to work with people, right? He's a true introvert, brilliant engineer, and he was on this team, which was extremely frustrating for him. And he thought everybody else was the problem, right?
Mm,
And he was literally suicidal. And we showed him what his superpower was and what he was meant to be doing. His
wow.
brain just perceives every single detail and nuance that other people just don't even know are there.
Mhm.
And so it's hard for him to work with other people. So, anyways, that one thing flipped his entire life around. So, yes, truly, context is key when it comes to mood and behavior.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, yeah, it was amazing. The results were incredible. And like other areas of, I know that I believe there's 36 reports, is that right? That you get when you do that DNA test?
Yeah,
36
and we
reports?
just added. Um, did you get the longevity report?
I
You did?
did get the
Okay, that was
longevity.
just recently added, so it's some
Okay.
new information there. So that's just another example of interpretation. We haven't studied more genes. We just are
Right.
using the same genes to interpret a new problem of longevity,
Oh,
right?
wow.
We're able to go ask whatever question we need to ask. So
Mhm.
really, we are an interpretation company, which is what was missing. We're not
Exactly.
testing, anybody can do. It's what does it all mean? How do I apply it? That was the important part.
Agree. What is the application of this information for my
Yeah.
life? How can I
Yeah.
make better choices with this information that I'm being given?
Yep.
And like, if I look at, the category that looked at like, what was it? I think it was like vitamins and supplements. There were things in there that, really, really surprised me. Like vitamin B12. I didn't know there are three forms of vitamin B12. And I was looking at like, I had like my vitamin B12 pills and I'm like, oh, wow, I'm literally using the wrong one.
Yeah.
Right. So like that's one amazing insight. Vitamin D. Vitamin D is huge, right? And like I've been deficient in vitamin D my entire life. And I continue to get like the 50,000 IU prescription from my doctor. And all I do is keep taking them. And my vitamin D levels are still low, right?
Yeah.
And then after you reading your report said, well, there's like three ways. I think you're better off explaining how we can absorb vitamin D into our bodies, because I think that this is a really, really important topic.
It's super important. It's the most important micronutrient of all. It drives literally 10% of human biochemistry. So all the little jobs that your body is doing, whether it's hormones, mood, bone development, all this stuff, 10% of that is dependent on vitamin D. Almost every job your body does requires vitamin D. So It's actually a hormone, by the way. It's not even a vitamin. I believe it's been rebranded a vitamin to take its value away, because if everybody had enough, there'd be a lot less illness and disease,
Mm,
right?
so
So it's also the most complex metabolic pathway of all the micronutrients. So vitamin C, A, all the other ones have one gene that takes the thing and converts it into what you need, and then your body can use it.
mhm,
Vitamin D has three, because it's potentially toxic if you overdose, and because our ancestors were out in the sun all day, so they got too much.
right.
So there's step one. How do I take the D2 that I get from the sun and convert it to the D3, the active form that my body needs? That's one gene. Then there's, how do I, now that I have it in my blood, how do I actually transport it to the cell where it's used? That's another gene. Now that I got it there, how do I bind it and actually connect it to the cell so it's being used? And there's a binding gene. So there's three steps. So someone like yourself may have low levels, not because they don't have enough vitamin D, but because they can't transport it and bind it fast enough. So a doctor saying, go take 50,000 IU, what if none of it got to the cell? What was the point?
Exactly, which
Right?
is I think what happened for me, because when I look at that three-step process, step number one, my ability to get that vitamin D from the sun was suboptimal.
Right.
Step two, I believe, which was the ability of the vitamin D to get into my bloodstream, was
Yes.
also
Transport.
suboptimal.
Right.
Step three, the ability for vitamin D to bind, that was good, that was optimal. But
Right.
if I can't get through step one and two, I'm never going to reach step three,
Yep.
right?
So the
And
answer to that isn't yes, because step one isn't the best, you need a little bit more, but you need multiple doses. It's not about taking all at once, it's about slowly dripping it, because you can't transport it fast enough. So I give you 50,000 IU, you might only use 2,000 of that.
right,
So what was
and
the
it's
point?
once
And
a
now,
week,
yeah, sorry?
and it's 50,000 IUs to be taken once a week.
At one, yeah, it's not for you. So now if you think about your ancestry, I'm just looking at your skin tone, it's like kind of Mediterranean, right? And what were those people doing for centuries? They were out in the sun all day. And you are now genetically designed to
Yeah,
take a slow drip of vitamin D constantly. You don't transport it efficiently, but you
right.
bind it well once you get it there, which means you need to take like 3 doses a day, probably 3,000 IU a few times a day, right? 2 to 3 times a day. And
Okay,
now all of a sudden you'll see those vitamin D levels go up, taking a lot less.
right, right. And there was also another recommendation in my DNA report, which was to take vitamin D simultaneously with K2,
Yes. Yeah.
because this is what helps transport the vitamin D, is what I understood from the report. So
Yeah. And
yeah, go ahead.
because you need to take a higher dose, it's potentially toxic. It can lead to calcification and other problems. This is why your body's so careful with vitamin D. And so the K2 helps with that. Magnesium also helps. Taking it with fat helps you metabolize it better, right? So there's little hacks to just get it into the cell faster.
So take it with a meal, like take your vitamin D
A
with
spoon of olive oil, a spoon of butter,
okay.
a
Oh,
little
really?
bit of fat. And if you don't have fat, suppose you're fasting, you take some magnesium with it. It helps absorb.
That's incredible. So yeah, like these are the insights that the report provides, which like honestly, when after I read the report and I looked at, how I can, it really provides a lot of recommendations and things that you can do that are easy to understand and easy to implement. I
Yeah.
honestly wanted to like tell everybody, like I think people are sick of me because all I do is tell them about the DNA report. You got to take the report. You got to do the test. You got to have a report. It's almost like a map of you, of what makes you thrive, what
Yeah.
can create problems in the future, what can you do now to fix that, right? So it's like, why wouldn't you want this information? And like,
Yeah.
I wish, the first thing I thought was, I wish I had this information years ago. The different choices I could have made to set myself up, to be healthier, to have a better lifestyle, to be able to thrive. And like, it's amazing that we have this information now, but for me it's like, okay, how can we spread the word? How can we get more people aware of this? Right? Like, because like for me, why aren't doctors prescribing this to people saying, hey, take the test. I'm going to be able to provide you more personalized care. I'll be able to better understand what your issues are instead of continuously treating all your symptoms. I can really understand your underlying issues and problems and tackle that so that all your symptoms can go away. Like, why isn't that happening? Is it too early?
So we have a healthcare system that's designed around acute care. So we do a really good job of responding to a broken arm and terminal cancer and acute problems.
Mhm.
That exact same toolkit is used for chronic conditions, which are not meant to be treated the same way. You shouldn't be responding to pain. You should be using the pain as a signal to then investigate why did it happen. And pain means anything, heart disease, hair loss, skin problems. They all ultimately lead to the same thing. 14 of the 15 top killers in the medical system in the US at least are all rooted in inflammation. So
Yes.
whether it's heart disease, cancer, respiratory issues, dementia, the 14 of the 15 top killers are all the exact same thing. They're inflammation. Which disease? It just depends on which hardware you inherited is suboptimal, right? So whether you're going to get breast cancer or cognitive decline is a combination of the inflammation plus your hardware. And by the way, the 15th one, which is actually the number 3 cause of death, is medical error, which is also rooted in inflammation because you're not going to have a medical error unless you're sick in the first place. So you want to avoid that, right? So all we're saying is if you maintain the health of the cell, you cannot be inflamed, which means you cannot have a disease and you're going to age slower also. So you can now truly make it a choice whether you have that average American story of I had my first chronic disease by 55 and two by 65 and the last 15 years of my life in treatment. None of that needs to happen. If you weren't born with something that's a true genetic condition, you don't have it. You develop it by making choices that are wrong. And like you said, doctors themselves don't know that this is the way the body works, right? They aren't armed with the toolkit to prevent and reverse. They're armed with diagnose and treat, right?
Yeah.
Here's what you have is called, and here's the pill that fixes it. But it doesn't fix it, it manages it and
Right.
maintains it at some lower. And guess what? Now you're also going to get this condition and this condition because you didn't get rid of the inflammation, the root cause. So the truth is to understand why your cells get sick, whether it's your hormones, whether it's your detox pathways, your anti-inflammatory pathways, your metabolic pathways that you mentioned, your brain and the way you deal with stress. All of these things contribute. Optimize those root causes and you won't get sick. It's truly impossible if there's no inflammation.
Yeah, no, absolutely, completely agree. I think we've been conditioned to think that it's normal to get sick. It's normal to
Yeah.
develop, cancers. It's this is aging. I think like, it's maybe not normal to age. Like there are things that we can do to, like right now there's so much in the biohacking space where people are actually reversing their
Yeah.
age, by, their biological clock,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
So
Th- And take me for an example of that. So
yeah,
when we started this journey, I had eczema, psoriasis, migraines, gut issues, and depression.
oh my
And I
gosh.
had 5 different doctors giving me 5 different pills. And I really thought that's what I was supposed to do. And they all happened at the same time. And I had never been sick prior to that. So I asked the question, why is this happening? And I really thought I was going to get an answer. Like, okay, all this happened all at once, over a few, there must be something I did wrong. And the answers I had to kind of read in between the lines was like, we don't do that here, right? We don't ask why, we don't determine, we mask it, we treat it for you. And then that's why there's 5 doctors, 5 pills, different scans, whatever. So then that's what drove me to understand my genetics because I figured there's something wrong here. And I did discover that I was missing key genes, right? And so at the time we started, I was 38 and my biological age was 43. I tested my cardiovascular and methylation markers, and there's certain things you can do. There's different beliefs on what biological age actually is. They'll all get you some ballpark, but the way I believe it works, I was 43. I now actually am 43. It's been 5 years since we started the research and built the company and all that. And my biological age is 33, right? So I've been able to reverse it 10 years while living an additional 5 years. So a delta value of 15 years. I feel it. I feel amazing when I go train now. It feels very different than it used to feel 5 years ago. The way I sleep, my mood, my brain, it's all different. And so this stuff, even if you're damaged per se, you can fix and heal and repair. The body's resilient as long as you start early enough, you know. So yeah, so it's I did it. I'm not smarter than anyone else in the room, so anybody can do it.
So that makes me very curious. What did you do different after doing the testing and getting that information? What did you do different that was able to like what information were you able to take and execute on that was able to reverse your age by 15 years in the last 5?
So there's when you find that there's a genetic suboptimality, so your body doesn't do a job certain well,
Mhm.
doesn't do a certain job well, sorry, you then have two choices. One is to avoid whatever that stuff is. So for me, for example, my gut has zero detox capacity. I don't clear toxins that are coming in with my food. And so it's a big threat for me. So I have two options. I either have to eliminate every single toxin from entering my gut, or I have to turn up the dial by supplementing and allowing my body to actually do that job. And I did both. So I discovered through my genome everything that was broken and wrong, and
Okay.
everything that it was doing well that I didn't need to focus on. And I determined my priorities. It wasn't about I have eczema, I have psoriasis. It is I have inflammation and I have autoimmunity. And
Mhm.
those things are causing all of these problems,
Mhm.
right? So I then started to remove the bad chemicals, toxins, mold, stress, stressful people, toxic people, all the stuff that trigger all these things, right? And I started to add the right supplements, the right food. I changed the way I exercise. I was overdoing the training, thinking that that's why my belly wouldn't go away. I wasn't working hard enough. I was actually overworking, and
Oh,
it was
wow.
causing a stress on my body, which was causing me to store fat, which
And
was kind of
does that create inflammation as well?
oh, for sure. Yeah, yeah. The constant cortisol response of overtraining, which so many people are stuck in, like, I'm doing everything right. Why is this not working for me? Because you're
Yeah,
doing everything right for the guy on the YouTube video that you watch that worked for him. You're not
exactly.
him, right?
Exactly.
And it probably did work for him. But if you talk to that person, probably took him 7 years to figure out what worked,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, we can't
And
just
now,
copy other people.
yeah. And so you have to learn the way your body works
Mhm.
and do that. And so that's what I did. And it wasn't a mission to reverse my biological age. It was just an outcome of just doing everything right, which shows you how slow we're actually supposed to age if we do everything right, right? Our ancestors didn't die of chronic disease. They died of either bacterial or viral infection, some new threat, or war, or old age. And the primary source of death was old age.
All right.
That's what most people died of. They got old and frail and they died.
So basically like natural causes.
Just natural causes, dying in your sleep.
Right.
Adrenaline starts pumping, the heart can't handle it, and you die. Right?
That's rare
That's
now.
what happens.
And that's
Yeah.
rare.
Yeah. So chronic disease is a modern problem. It's about 150 1870s is when this really started, when chemical usage started, when everything got industrialized.
Mhm.
And then in the 1970s, our food chain really changed, and that's when it became exponentially more of a problem.
Right.
So we have this genetic wiring that's designed for a very different old reality that doesn't exist anymore. We haven't changed, and we're not going to change for millions of years, but the reality has changed dramatically. So we have to keep up with that, which means removing habits, adding supplements, changing your diet, being a lot more vigilant than we typically are.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And when you talked about the toxicity and the environmental factors, how important is it for us to be consuming, non-GMO, organic, grass-fed, pasture-raised products? Like, how much is that stuff really affecting our bodies and inflaming our bodies?
I would say the biggest food and threat is linoleic acid and omega-6. So
Okay.
and this is what really happened in the 1970s. So the addition of high fructose corn syrup as a sugar, which is a disaster. It's a potent poison. So sugar itself isn't so bad as we make it out to be. Carbs aren't as bad as we make it out. In fact, genetically, we'll tell some people that they actually use carbs as fuel very efficiently and they should stick to it. Right? They actually don't feel well when they don't. It's the high fructose corn syrup, which is a toxic poison. But omega-6 and linoleic acid, which has become prolific because of the use of seed and vegetable oils. Uh, Horrible. It's horrible, horrible, inflammatory, stays in your body forever. Like 7, 8 years, it will stay in your body, and crazy inflammatory substance that's causing a lot of chronic disease. Um, food that's been altered, it's not so much like it's making you sick. It's more that it has no nutritional value, and so you need to overeat, and you're not getting the minerals. So you are what you ate, but you are what you ate, meaning that where did this plant come from? What soil did it grow in? A plant is meant to deliver minerals into your body that are key and required. They're not optional. And they don't have that anymore because the soil is dead. So there may be studies saying, hey, this GMO plant does not make you sick, right? And it's probably true because it's a bell pepper that is just a bell pepper with color and whatever. And it may be true, but that study was not structured properly. What's making you sick is that the bell pepper is dead. It has no life in it. It's not delivering what you need, right? So that's what's making you sick, is you're not getting the micronutrients that the non-GMO pepper would have delivered you in the proper organic soil that has worms that are pooping, that are making the soil so rich, right? Scoop up soil in your lawn and try and find worms like when we were kids and it would rain and worms would run around. That
And
doesn't
now
happen anymore. You don't
I
see that,
haven't seen one in years. I haven't seen
right?
one on my driveway in years. It's
Because
true.
whether it's a farm or your driveway, everything is covered in pesticides. We want our lawn to be beautiful, so we're spraying it and killing it, right? The worms are dead. The soil is dead. So we've
Our
changed
food is
everything.
dead.
Our food is dead,
Our
right?
food is dead. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's the problem. And so there's hacks, like you get minerals and mineral salts, that will, and you have to just change your perception of what food is. Food isn't what our ancestors got around on. Food is now supplements and salts and biohacking tools. And because the actual food isn't really getting you much benefit, it's dead.
Right. Hence why we're, not getting what we need. There's inflammation. We're
Yeah.
getting autoimmune conditions, and we're getting sicker and sicker as a society,
Yeah.
as a population, really. So yeah, I really want to be mindful of our time together. And I just want to ask you, Kashif, like, where can people find you? If they want to know more about like you, your company, how they can do the DNA testing, where do they need to go?
Sure. If you want to learn more, we have a podcast called Unpilled, which we don't really promote. It's really just for our customers to learn, right? So people that have had a test that want to now start developing new habits, they go there and they learn stuff. So it's called Unpilled. Anyone's welcome to go there. My personal Instagram, we put out a lot of news about things that we think are interesting. So that's Kash, Kash, Khan, Khan official, Kash Khan official. And the company is the DNAcompany.com. The test is called the 360. There's also programs for people. Suppose there's, a clinical issue like breast cancer or Alzheimer's. We have functional genomic trained clinicians that can work on those things. So you can also look into clinical programs. Or if it's more like, hey, I had these last 10 pounds, I just can't figure it out. I'm stuck. We will figure it out, right? So there's the test and there's programs if you need it. The report is designed in a way where you don't need someone to guide you through it. It's self-explanatory. So yeah, and that's what it is. So other than that, I would say we're at a lot of conferences, constantly speaking, trying to teach clinicians and doctors the future of medicine. So you might catch us at a conference somewhere if you're part of that circuit. So
Yeah. No, that's incredible. I mean, like, just for myself, I've seen so many benefits in my own life and how I've taken the report findings and being able to implement them to make those changes. And like, honestly, I just want everybody to have access to this. And I wish that it will become more mainstream and very, very quickly so that people can take control of their lives and make the right decisions and choices that'll allow them to live that optimized life. So yeah, I'm really excited to see what the future holds with the work that you're doing and where all this is going. Thank you so much, Kashif, for being here with me today.
it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, take care.
All right. All right.